You ever notice how much easier life becomes once you've decided whose fault everything is? Not better, just easier. Because uncertainty, uncomfortable. Complexity, uncomfortable. Looking in the mirror, uncomfortable. But finding an enemy, ooh, that's simple. This week, we're talking about politics, foreign policy, incels, grievance, and a pattern that keeps showing up in all of them. The moment private frustration and pain becomes public complaints and blame. This is Shrink the Nation. Let's go.
This is Shrink the Nation, a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably holding a drink and definitely holding a thought. The views expressed here are ours alone. They do not represent our employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or most emphatically, our families. They've been very clear about that. This show is for education and entertainment only. Nothing you hear is medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. We're clinicians, not your clinicians. If something we say stirs you up, that's not a crisis, that's a journal entry, or an email sent politely. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers on the internet. And if you are in real distress, please reach out to a professional who can actually help you.
All right, welcome back. I'm David. I've got 20 plus years in the military. I'm also board certified psychiatrist, and today is Father's Day. So happy Father's Day out there to all the gentlemen in our tens.
Fives of listeners.
Our fives of fathers out there who've had their loins engaged in procreative processes.
Yeah. You had to go there. You had to go there.
Well, all the work you did to become a dad. I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
proud of the tens of minutes that it took our fives of listeners to sire offspring.
I think you've already went off the rails, and we're 53 seconds in. So, hey, everybody, it's Rob. I'm going to swoop in here and save David from his terrible analogies and bad decision making this early in the morning. I've got, I don't know, a bunch of years on the planet Earth, and a lot of them were in the military, and more than weren't. And a lot of them were in psychiatry. Oddly enough, more than weren't at this point in my life.
He too has sired offspring.
I have side offspring, and I do wish Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I'm actually more focused on all the work that was required after they came onto Earth. So hopefully,
Okay,
everyone
so
listening, good dads.
dozens of minutes spent saying things like, shut the fuck up. I'm watching the game.
Get me a beer. Yeah,
Rub some dirt on it.
yeah. Don't do that. It hurts.
If you're gonna cry, I'll give you something to cry about. All the dad sayings. Actually, my favorite one is, if you're cold, go stand in that corner. It's 90 degrees.
Never heard that one. Oh,
Look at that.
Must be-
Epiphanies.
that must be unique to your neck of the woods.
Yeah, we do math here. It's not
Yeah.
Appalachia.
Yep.
We know that corners are 90 degrees.
All right. It's early and I'm slow, but maybe I just need more coffee. So, folks, it's yet again an early morning for us. And so this is two bourbon-free shows in a row. I'm back with my old standby, Black Rifle Coffee.
And I've got a giant ass grenade-shaped mug, which is, I think, 4 Americanos fit in here. And I'm going to be feeling good at the end of this
Well, yeah,
in a different way than normal,
that's got to be 200 milligrams of caffeine there.
if there's one.
Yep.
Yeah, but we can still do our drinking game. Okay, let's see. I'll go with bad jokes from me. You can
Okay.
drink, Robbie.
A relatively high probability of bad jokes from you.
I'm going to say, if you say an acronym incorrectly,
Yeah, that's a high probability. Stimulates a high probability.
always.
And then there's my old standbys at this particular juncture. I seem to say that a lot.
That's
I
a good
don't.
one.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like doing a podcast to point out your verbal tics and also the moments when you mispronounce something. So yeah, that's a good starting point for us.
We do anything that the Gen Z would consider cringe. I'd say just
Cringe.
drink. Just drink.
It's
Like using
90
the word cringe.
cringe. Cringe is cringe.
Drink.
Yeah, it's about 95% of my life. I fear falls into the cringe category. So, David, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we got a couple of topics, and I think the one we got to, man, the gift that just keeps on giving, Robbie, is this DNI post. Holy shit. When is this going to happen?
Yep, the comeback kid.
Comeback kid. It really is. I think Bill Pulte, you've got to be impressed. For somebody who has just no actual qualifications, has been called out by both sides, he's back. Bill is back.
He's back and he showed up a day early looking for the employee logs.
Yeah, just a interesting story. Okay, so for those of you who aren't aware of what happened, what occurred, I think, is that we pointed out that Jay Clayton also not qualified to do that job. And everyone said, okay, fine, no, not him too. Of course, I'm kidding. No, I don't think anybody listens to us other than the tens that do. And, I'm sure this is just playing in the background for most people's pets to keep them entertained while they're at work. So probably not because we said anything, but what happened was from various reporting was that there was pushback bipartisan on Bill Pulte of the Pulte home's legacy for having no experience in the intelligence realm and people realizing this is a loyalty pick. And for some reason that bothered the Senate this time. Didn't seem to bother him for a lot of other things, but it bothered him this time. The administration, and by the administration, we mean Donald Trump, said, just kidding. This is an interim pick. And so they instead put Jay Clayton up for the nomination, which I thought was kind of quick because it looked like that was going to just completely supplant the interim pick. And as we discussed last week, Jay Clayton does have a fairly impressive legal resume, but again, no intelligence experience. And so before his nomination hearing, the Senate, I guess they weren't moving quickly enough on the FISA bill, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, specifically Section 702, which goes over whether the U.S. intelligence agencies are allowed to collect communications of non U.S. persons located outside of the United States without obtaining a traditional search warrant for each target. This was something that was going to expire sort of naturally, and Donald Trump was not pleased with the amount of time that it was either taking to complete this. But he also wanted the Save America Act to be mixed in as they were looking to extend it. And the Senate was not willing to do that. Now, the Save America Act, we don't need to get into it, look it up, but essentially it fucks with elections in so many ways. And
In order to register to vote, it requires proof of American citizenship. So it requires a passport or a birth certificate. The assumption is, and I don't know why this is always the assumption, but the assumption is that those who might vote Democrat are going to have more difficulty producing said documents than folks that would vote conservative. I don't think that's accurate. Honestly, I think folks who are lower socioeconomic status are going to have challenges because I don't know how many people have a passport, but even having possession of an original copy of your birth certificate could be difficult for a good swath of the American population.
well, ironically, I think when they cleansed the rolls in my home state, kind of pushing for some of these things, what they found right before this last election was that the vast majority of people who got cleaned off of the rolls for not having the proper proof of citizenship were actually elderly Republicans. There had to be a last minute order from a judge to undo the cleansing of the rolls because it actually would have lost the Republican Party hundreds of thousands of votes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're 82 years old,
You don't have your original birth certificate. When you're getting ready to leave the planet, you're not really so interested in when you showed up. This actually reminds me of probably every single command that I was ever at, where you would come in and have this like ridiculous command checklist to come in the door. I actually had that every time I left because I never turned it in. Because as it turns out, the command check in list is fucking bullshit. It's like 2 weeks of walking around, meeting people that you'll never meet again until the day that you leave.
one other element to the FISA fight, too, is that the reason they originally allowed it to grandfather, and this was bipartisan on both sides of the aisle, they said, we're not giving this power to Bill Pulte based on his past behavior.
Yeah.
So he worked in the Federal Housing Security Agency.
Finance.
Federal Housing Finance Agency. All right, drink. I messed up a.
Security
Yeah.
might actually make him sound as if he had some kind of credential to be in DNI, intelligence security. They sound similar, but no.
He had access to mortgage records, and there is general speculation. And if you're keeping track at home, many of the DOJ attacks on political enemies of this administration have been focused on, surprise, surprise, mortgages. So there was some speculation he utilized his access to that mortgage information in order to facilitate these DOJ lawsuits. So both sides said, we don't trust him with FISA powers. we're letting this sunset. It was a dual thing. One is FISA was passed right after 9/11, and it has never sat completely easy with the American people. But so that was part of it. And then part of it is that this was a protest against Bill Pulte as a selection because he's so utterly unqualified and has already demonstrated he utilizes governmental power for political ends.
Well, and what's interesting too is that MAGA has never been a fan of FISA, which dates back to Russiagate. And I guess we should explain FISA. Section 702 gives the government the ability to surveil non US citizens without a warrant in their investigations. But what that can do and often does is it sweeps up to US citizens into those investigations because they may be on those communications or they may just be found during the collection of information to have some involvement or just whatever. Maybe they weren't even, they just happened to tap everything. And so MAGA has never liked this because they have believed that Donald Trump was also swept up in this because of Russiagate and other investigations. So anytime anything would happen to Donald Trump, it would be an accusation against the government spying on him, X, Y, or Z, which may or may not be true. I don't know. I just wasn't part of that. I had no fucking clue. But what's interesting is that now that he's in control, he wants the ability to have the power. And having somebody like Bill Pulte, who critics have argued has weaponized his role in other governmental positions to attack perceived enemies, the concern would be that putting him into a position that has more than just financial housing records would potentially be even more dangerous. And so I think this goes a bit deeper than what we discussed, but we sort of poked fun at the fact that the man has no qualifications to be the DNI.
Right. So when you need someone to coordinate the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, the FBI, and 15 other agencies, you naturally go to a mortgage guy.
I would. But if the mortgage guy was willing to pull whatever records he could on anybody that you didn't like and feed that to the DOJ, that would be a good pick if that's what you're looking for, because the
If
DNI is going to have access to literally everything.
that's the goal.
That's the assumed goal.
The interesting thing this week is that because of that FISA Section 702 kerfluffle and the fact that Trump had insisted the Save America Act be included in that vote and the Senate Republicans refused, he then canceled the confirmation hearing for Jay Clayton. In doing so, well, one, he didn't have really the authority to do it, but he probably bleated it out
He
on
truth socialed it. Yeah, he did a
Truth
bleep.
Social. So he bleated it out like a wounded goat. And as the ultimate fuck you to his Senate allies, he then went back to Pulte. So this was a poke in the eye to specifically Senate Republicans, which is fascinating. I mean, it was a little bit of a temper tantrum. We're back to the psychology of making a bad pick and being so psychologically fragile. You can't admit it was a bad pick. You doubled down on it. But this was clearly an FU to his Republican led Senate.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing to me, Robbie, is that it's not just the fact that he tried to cancel the Senate confirmation hearing via Truth Social, which is just chef's kiss, childish, but the fact that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, actually said he doesn't have the authority to cancel this hearing. The only way we're not having this hearing is if he pulls the pick or Jay Clayton is told not to show up and doesn't. That's the only way we're not doing it. And that seems like such a small thing, but this is a very big pushback on the administration's attempt to run this country as a CEO runs a business. And because there are co equal branches of government, now for those of you who might be MAGA and don't understand what co equal means, it means they each have a same amount of authority in their realm, not they each acquiesce to one. But this is the first time that they've exercised that from the Senate perspective of you're not in charge here of us. We decide what's going to happen. Now, psychologically, though, that's fascinating. Having not seen this yet, what's happening? Why are they finally pushing back on Donald Trump?
Well, Part of it ultimately is because Donald Trump has put himself in this position. So when you push the bounds over and over again, you make your other Republicans who are less shameless. Actually, just to be clear, I am not really necessarily picking on Republicans as being more shameless than Democrats. There are plenty of examples of shameless Democrats. It's an equal opportunity offender. But most of our politicians actually are bound by a certain amount of public image, saying what they mean, following through with what they say. And he's made them, bend over and kiss their own asses so many times that their poor backs are just shot. There's only so much flexibility politicians can engage in. So that's part of it. Part of it is he's forced this over and over and over again, and they finally found something in which they could coalesce and actually straighten their backs and show that they had a bit of a spine. The other part is that he's primaried so many of them. Interestingly, not because they weren't allies. I mean, when you look at their voting records, they were 95+% right along with him. But in that world, if it's not 100%, it's 0%. So it's the Ricky Bobby model of loyalty, which is your first to your last, baby. That's it. So he primaried several of them. They're often referred to as the YOLO caucus now, which you only live once. But now that they're have been primaried, they're not up for reelection. They're lame ducks. They're finishing out their time. They all of a sudden have really no compelling reason to be blindly loyal to this president.
Yeah, but I think what their big concern at this point now is from John Thune, because he's not been primaried, would be what are they going to do at the midterms? Because I think what they're finally starting to see, it's not just a shame. I mean, Donald Trump is shameless. The Senate and the Congress have shamelessly followed him to whatever end. It was working, I guess, for them when his polling numbers were decent. And I think anything close to 50% is decent. I think they were fine. I think they felt, okay, yeah. I mean, he's making the people happy. He's polling terribly now, and following him is no longer an asset; it's a liability, and that's going to change your habits. It's going to change what you're willing to do or not do. And as it turns out, when you put up a pick that everybody views as being ridiculous, and you think, I'm going to pay the price for this. That's what's interesting. It's not just that he's punishing. And I agree with you. Yes, he has primaried enough of the Republican Party to weaken his caucus significantly, where their ability to just pass things isn't what he thinks it is, apparently. But then add in the fact that it's becoming a problem for them in their own aspirations to continue to exist within this government, not just because he's a danger to them and that he will try to get them primaried, but also in that the people are watching them do the things that he wants them to do, and it's just not working. But they're going against even their own Republican values. It's not small government when the federal government is trying to make all the decisions. It's not fiscally responsible to make the debt skyrocket. It's just not following the Republican values that they're even used to. And so while he was winning and looking good, they were okay with following it. Now they're not. We can all see how somebody eventually you'd say, hey, we're not winning, so we're not going to keep following you. It took a while, but here they are with the midterms around the corner. I think they're finally realizing the writing's going to be on the wall if they keep doing what he wants.
Yep, that's a good ad. Let's move on to the Iran situation. It's taken a few turns this past week.
And we will move on, Robbie, but first we have a commercial. So this episode is brought to you today by Robbie's Validation Depot. Are you a middle-aged professional with a stable career, loving family, and meaningful accomplishments, but somehow still convinced that one negative comment on Facebook has destroyed your entire self-worth? Then come on down to Robbie's Validation Depot. At Robbie's, we understand that inner confidence is hard. That's why we've replaced it with external approval. Need someone to tell you you're smart? We've got a guy. Need someone to tell you you're attractive? That's a different guy. Need someone to tell you your ex was wrong, your boss was wrong, your critics were wrong, and you're secretly destined for greatness? We've got an entire call center. And for a limited time, sign up for our Platinum Validation Package and receive 3 compliments per day. 1 fake standing ovation per week. A personalized certificate declaring your high value, and a handwritten note assuring you that the problem is definitely everyone else. Side effects may include podcasting, excessive confidence, inability to accept criticism, posting through it, starting a movement. Robbie's Validation Depot, because self esteem is temporary, but attention lasts forever.
Yeah, and I've been utilizing this service now for about 10 months, and it's truly changed my life. Unearned validation has really made all the difference for me. And what I encourage our tens of listeners to understand is projection is a hell of a drug. It ain't them, champ. It's you. So
Robbie, this is where you're supposed to look in the camera, say, I'm not just the CEO, then take off your hat and say,
remember, yeah. All right. So with that, and yeah, everybody, please subscribe to that. I'm sure it's what $49.99. It's a pittance.
it's 45.47.
45.47.
The cell phone plan cost.
Okay, perfect. It's a pittance for what it gets. And, I will personally handwrite on a sticky note that you can put in your brown bag lunch that,
Every day.
every day. So
You're not going to use auto pen, are you? Son of a bitch.
I'll have to use AutoPen. I'll just have to. I'm sorry. So Iran. Iran's taken some turns this week, and it's become a hostage negotiation meets a narcissistic Thanksgiving family dinner. It's sort of fascinating in that, it's no longer really, I mean, fundamentally, the agreement that was signed was not a peace deal. It was the equivalent of a promise ring that, some 14-year-old might give his girlfriend. It is, I promise that maybe someday, possibly, we might think about making a promise to then maybe think about accomplishing something. And within, a day of that promissory note being signed, memo of understanding, Iran again announced we've closed the Strait of Hormuz.
I think the promise ring analogy is pretty good because I wonder how many promise rings have been used to give a hand job to somebody who did not give that person the promise ring.
A drink, everyone. We're
Promise
in
ring
that
has touched a lot of penises.
we're in that sketchy analogy zone, folks. You might as well just go ahead and guzzle it right now.
That's all I can think of is like whoever gave this promise ring isn't the one getting the hand job later that night.
No, it's not JD Vance. No, no. I also, yeah. No one's
Don't fucking
no
ruin everyone's day, Robbie.
right. No one's touching his penis. His energy also has me just slayed. He's got that. Yeah, I know
I'm
this is a group.
helping.
Right.
He's he's like Todd from BoJack Horseman.
I'm helping. He's got that. I know this is a group project, but I still think I can personally get extra credit energy running right now. Clearly thinking this is his springboard into a run for the presidency here in a few years.
I like the group project analogy because every group project that I've ever been on in my life, I ultimately ended up doing all the work. But there was always somebody there who then took all the credit. Now, the difference here is I don't know who's doing any of the work on this group project, Pakistan maybe, and those who are getting credit. That's not a great project, and it's not turning out well, and it's touching penises, which doesn't make a lot of sense, Robbie.
We've got the dream team of international diplomacy. We've got JD Vance, we've got Steve Witkoff, and we've got Jared Kushner, none of which have had significant experience in international relations, none of which have any training in it. None of them have any expert knowledge about, I don't know, nuclear material, ballistic missile capabilities, the sorts of things that you actually have to know the details because the details are going to matter. When all these things are written down in words on paper that's supposed to be followed to the letter, the twist of a few words can make a huge difference. And both sides, both this administration and I guess by extension the United States and Iran have demonstrated that they will sign anything and it does not necessarily compel them to follow it. So
Well, it's an MOU, right? It's not a deal. Being compelled to follow something that says, I am compelled to follow this, which is this plan to make a deal. I mean, this is the concepts of a plan.
So, one of the interesting things about this is that, the JCOA, which has been Trump's whipping
Drink,
boy,
everybody, drink.
JCPA?
Drink again. JCPOA.
JCPOA. All right, good deal. So the JCPOA, clearly I have a problem with that.
JPCOA. Damn it, it's the
What?
JPCOA.
JPCOA. Yeah.
Well, but you
So
said
that,
JCOA. No, it's the JCPOA. God damn it. Everyone drink.
yeah,
We're all drinking.
we're all
The
drinking. It's a
JCPOA.
tough,
Joint
that's a tough one.
Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Yes, and it's been a whipping boy of Trump's before he even ran for his original term. In that, and he talks about us flying in pallets of money, and there's actually some truth to that. We really did fly in pallets of money because they were disconnected from international banking, so we actually had to provide cash. Now it was their money; it was money that was locked up in the sanctions that we freed up, and I think it was like $1 billion or $1.5 billion.
They had actually purchased weapons from us. Is it the 50s or 70s? They had purchased weapons from us, and then
Right
we
before the
didn't.
fall, yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't give them the weapons, and so there was money that was frozen assets that was theirs. We just didn't give it to them. When you look at the JCPOA, there was about somewhere between 100 and $150 billion of frozen assets that were to be released in some way or shape or form. A lot of question marks as to if they would have gotten that money, how much they would have gotten, where it would have actually come from, and everything else. So there's a lot of question marks. This deal includes $300 billion
A basement, a minimum of 300 billion.
to rebuild the country that we just bombed the ever loving bejesus drink people, bejesus out of. And now, again, still question marks on where's that money coming from, who's going to actually end up paying it, things like that. But I'm not a mathematician. I've never claimed to be, nor will I be, but I do believe 300 billion is more than 150 billion, which was the number that Donald Trump would frequently cite when saying how bad the JCPOA was. And so it's more. It's more
Yeah,
money.
it's more. It's
Yeah.
more. And it's simply not giving off the vibe to me that success is imminent. Because here's something that I know without a doubt. And it's tempting as Americans to assume that we are the best at everything. It's not entirely true. We certainly have the most powerful military that has ever been constructed in the history of the world. That is absolutely true. But we don't have the dream team actually doing the negotiations. And I promise you, Iran brought their dream team. They have included the very best that they have to offer. And if you make the mistake of thinking because it's Iran, they don't have intelligent, brilliant, well educated people, you're going to be at a disadvantage because they absolutely do. So it's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out. And it's going to be even more interesting watching the administration twist itself in knots to validate the dear leader that this is still a better deal because it's objectively not. It's objectively not a better deal. And in fact, it's not even a deal. It's a memo of understanding.
I think it's easy to look at it and assume that it's not a better deal. Well, it's not a deal at all, and I think that's probably the one important thing to think about. What I find fascinating about it all is that only time will tell as to whether this can be a better deal than the JCPOA was. The question marks that come into play would be, well, if it ends up not being a better deal, was it worth it? Were the efforts to get back to even get to the point of having the ability to sit down and have a deal, were those efforts worthwhile? And I think the critics would argue probably no, because the JCPOA was a fairly comprehensive anti-nuclear deal that was being followed. There were inspectors, there were specific requirements and limitations and everything. But the supporters would say now that, well, this war weakened them militarily, economically, emotionally enough to come back and have a deal or to potentially make a deal. And so if the deal is stronger on the back end, is that a better deal? I don't know. I'm not really here to I couldn't tell
Right.
you. We'd have
Well,
to see what the deal ends up being. An argument might be, but would we have ever had to have done all the military actions and the loss of life and all the economic pain and suffering and everything that's happened had the original JCPOA just been left in place because it got canceled with nothing to replace it? You could certainly make the argument that once it was canceled, Iran did not have to start making more and more nuclear
yeah.
material. And so there's a lot of like what ifs, but this is one of those things where time will probably tell us more than anything. I think my big concern is that we've demonstrated that Iran has the ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. whenever they want.
They
And
have.
that gives them a power.
The interesting thing is they don't need nukes anymore. They have a nuclear option, which is shut down the Strait of Hormuz. So nukes all of a sudden became less important to them. It became less valuable to them, and it's right there, and it's been there, and we've allowed them to prove they can do it. Now we're clearly not experts. We can weigh in and have opinions because everyone's got one. But from a psychological standpoint, this is shame management under geopolitical stress. So when a state feels cornered, they don't really ask what is rational. They ask what can we do so that we don't look weak. That's how you get materially irrational but symbolically necessary behavior. So Iran has to show it's not been humiliated. Trump needs to show he's dominant. Vance needs to show that he's actually a statesman and he's not just the guy that got sent to clean up dad's mess. The regional actors need to show that they were not abandoned and they were not duped. Markets need boring predictability. And what we end up here and what we'll see as this proceeds is that this is emotionally theatrical politics. And emotionally theatrical politics are just really bad at production. So we're going to see some serious psychological twisting in the wind as each side tries to make a statement, not so much reach a deal, not so much do something that's rational, but to save face.
We have this situation where the critics, and arguably we're a couple of them, the critics are going to look at this and say, yeah, but none of this was necessary in the first place. You had a deal
Absolutely.
in place, and you can make this argument. Certainly, you had a deal in place, you canceled it, you created a mess, you shit on the floor, and then want everybody to pat you on the back for cleaning it up. It's a fair argument to make. Drink, by the way. You can make a fair argument that that applies. The more, I think, difficult thing to do psychologically for all of us is to be able to look at the situation and remove a couple of things. One, it would be, well, it's irrelevant who shit on the floor when there's a big pile of shit on the floor. At that point, it's already there. There's a big steaming pile of well done steak and ketchup
Oh, God. Visceral.
on the floor. Now,
Oh, it hit me at my core
we know who dropped trow and left that there,
in that rat hole.
or it fell out of a depend or something. I don't know, but we know how it got there. It has to be cleaned up. We can't just leave it there and say, this is your fault. You're going to sit there and look at it. It's got to get cleaned up. The other side needs to not just pat on the back the person who cleans up their own mess that they created and say, you deserve a peace prize. Wow, look, you stopped a war that you started. Like, you don't get a peace prize for that. You don't get extra credit for cleaning up the mess you made. So I think that's psychologically, that's like the really, really hard thing to do, is to separate yourself from all of the history on both sides and just say, okay, we have a mess. It has to get cleaned up. And no, you don't get extra credit for cleaning it up. Right now, because the Democrats have so little power in government, they're kind of just sitting back, pointing the finger and saying, well, you made the mess. You need to clean it up. And everybody remember who made the mess. Do you want somebody walking around the White House with a leaky Depends streaming out the bottom of his pant leg because he's in his 80s,
Whether
like
whether you want it, you don't want it, you
tripping over
got
his
it.
own testicles from time to time.
So here's my last thought on that, and then we'll move forward. Is I find that the Strait of Hormuz has become its own character in this story. The strait it's open, it's closed, it's symbolically opened, it's emotionally unavailable. It's potentially seeing other people. It's become a character. I'm rooting for the strait. I'm rooting for the strait. I think it wants to be open. I think.
It's the most anti-LGBTQ thing I've ever heard you say. You got to wonder though too, is of the ships that did make it through for however many hours it was open, how many of those are like Russian and Chinese oil tankers? That would be the most trolling thing Iran could do, is say we've opened it up just to let Chinese and Russian oil make it through.
There's going to be a Lego YouTube video on this, and it's just going to be these Lego tankers going through the strait waving and smiling happily, and Russian and Chinese flags flying. So, okay.
Okay. Before we move on,
Shit.
all right, so this episode is brought to you today by Robbie's Need to Be Right Insurance. Have you ever been caught in the horrifying situation of discovering that you may have been mistaken? A bad feeling, isn't it? It really gets you to the core. It's visceral. Fortunately, Robbie's Need to Be Right Insurance has you covered. Our trained specialists immediately deploy one of several proven interventions: moving the goalposts, introducing new information, changing the subject, claiming that's what you meant all along, or our most popular package, That's not what I said, even when it's recorded, even when there's video, even when it happened 15 seconds ago. Robbie's need to be right insurance because growth is hard.
Yeah. I do have to avoid listening to past episodes of our podcast because it does highlight just how many times I'm wrong.
That's
And
what
you
you
know what
meant,
I love?
Robbie. That's what you meant.
Well, you know what I love about me? It's the confidence by which I can be wrong. I'm just utterly all in and never seem to learn either.
It's harder when there's no bourbon,
That's
but
the
that
truth.
confidence is strong.
That's the truth.
Let's get to our last topic, Robbie. Let's move on.
Yeah, so last week we talked about Andrew Tate and we made mention of incels multiple times. If you're a true hardcore listener of Shrink the Nation, we once had an episode talking about the plight of young men in today's world and how it's affected their politics.
Man, I got so much rough feedback from the
Yeah,
shit you and Keith said, Rob. I swear to
y-
God.
I know, I
I
know.
was like, I didn't even say that. I wasn't even, and
It
man,
wasn't
I got
me.
railroaded. I got fucking railroaded.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the cost of being near greatness, my friend. Anyway, so we've mentioned and I guess tacitly made jokes about incels on several occasions and probably many times throughout the podcast. But I thought, this might be a good opportunity for us to just chat about incels. What is an incel? How did they come to be? How do they play into the current manosphere and MAGA world?
Rock, did they crawl out from underneath?
Well, the mistake we made the young men episode is that we tried not to punch down. And, I think we're at our best when we're not punching down. So I don't want to punch down here. I really don't.
I like that
However,
you just started off with the mistake that we made in the previous episode that ended up getting David emotionally pegged
well,
with the big one was
well,
the thing that we're going to do this time too. Fucking beautiful, Robbie.
we,
I'm
we
looking
are.
forward to it.
Look,
I'll get the lube out.
we are going to channel the best of the Jungian archetype of the warrior and the father. You never punch down. So
Robbie, you
this
got a
is a,
fucking mouse in your pocket. Who is this we? I'm punching fucking straight down. I am
all
just
right.
stomping
All
my
right.
feet on.
All right.
Yeah, whatever you say that is uplifting to this population, that is yours, my friend. That is yours.
Well, I am not going to justify bad behavior at all. But what I
But you
do
will
want to do,
explain it away. You will.
well, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to try to understand the population. So, for our audience, and I'm going to assume most people know what this means, but incel is an abbreviation for involuntarily celibate, and it's a group of young men, classically in the like 18 to 32-year age range, who, for various reasons, feel like they have been shut out of the dating market. That they are in.
Hold on, Robbie. I just got a copy handed to me. This episode is brought to you today by Robbie's Institute for Advanced Incel Studies. Have you recently been rejected? Been on a bad date? Had someone leave you on a read? Then why take responsibility when you can join a movement? At Robbie's Institute for Advanced Incel Studies, our trained grievance professionals will help you transform ordinary disappointment into a comprehensive worldview. Our curriculum includes Introduction to Externalization. Learn why every problem in your life is actually someone else's fault. Intermediate resentment. Turn temporary setbacks into permanent identity. Advanced statistics. Misuse evolutionary psychology to explain things you don't understand. Graduate seminar. How to blame women for problems caused by your personality. And for our premium members, Robbie personally teaches the alpha mindset, a revolutionary system that allows you to simultaneously believe you're superior to everyone around you. Society
Mhm,
is rigged against you. Nobody
mhm.
appreciates your greatness, and none of this is your fault. Early reviews have been overwhelmingly negative, which we naturally interpret as proof that we're right. Side effects may include excessive podcasting, comment section combat, YouTube rabbit holes, chronic victimhood, and an inability to make eye contact with women. Robbie's Institute for Advanced Incel Studies, because self improvement is hard, but blaming society is free. All right, sorry, that one just came
Hot off
came
the
in
presses. Hot
hot off
off
the
the
press.
presses. Had to get that out. Okay. So the real issue is the ideology that can grow out of this sexual rejection, social isolation, shame, and perceived humiliation. And this population has sort of taken an interesting approach to this. So when you face those kinds of challenges, I suppose there's a fork in the road, we'll say. Is that a
They should just
wall?
go into the woods and kill a bear with a knife, right, Robbie?
Well,
That's what they're
I mean,
lacking.
that is one way you can approach this. I mean, you can go into radical self-improvement, I suppose. Another route, and in many ways, maybe the easier route, is to devolve into misogynistic victimhood, blame women as if they're a different species almost. It's really quite striking. And I guess the fascinating thing that I find in this population is that they are clearly a humiliated population, but they have fallen back to a very narcissistic defense of that humiliation. And they blame others, they blame women, which has something to do with, like, men who are successful with women were dealt a better genetic hand, they have a better skull shape. It's these really kind of antiquated ideas about attractiveness and appearance and genetics, and that it was just sort of baked into the cake and they really didn't have to do anything. And it's not about really what tends to attract the opposite sex, which is kindness, a little bit of self care, demonstrating that you have some goals and drive.
The real answer to their problem, and Tom Petty showed us this, is learn to play guitar.
That'd be a healthier way to go, no doubt.
Yeah. If you are an unattractive man and you are struggling to find women, learn to play guitar. I mean, that's it.
There was a paper actually released just this year
Was it called
on
Learn to Play Guitar?
no,
There probably was.
it was incel radicalization, and it identified a pathway from these teenagers who, by nature, are self conscious about their appearance. Social isolation and psychological distress led into blame seeking and radicalization and this kind of post radicalization identity. And this is affecting such a significant portion of our male population, our young male population. It's capturing them in their teen years when they are the most vulnerable. And, I assume our tens of listeners have all been teenagers. I remember being a teenager still, even though it's been a while. I remember being very uncomfortable with my looks and my height and whether my hair was right. I actually had hair then. So something I had to think about. Whether
You're not
people,
self conscious
what
about all this stuff now, Robbie?
you hit a certain point in your life and you're like, meh, this is what I
Oh,
got, man.
face made for radio, but okay, sure.
Well, it's kind of like the people who refuse to have their picture taken. And they're refusing to have their picture taken, not because everyone else doesn't know what they look like. Everyone else sees them. It's that they don't want to see themselves. And like that's a solution, but it is. I mean, sure. But this is a young population who are ridiculously sensitive to those sorts of things, and it's capturing them. And then the other element that I'm curious about your take on is the world has changed so much. COVID, social media, these aesthetic lives, these beautiful people leading beautiful lives that seem perfect. And it's all feeding into this psychology.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to preface. So man, you cut deep there sometimes because you're absolutely right. I want to separate the understanding of how somebody could go down that rabbit hole with the excusal for choosing to go down that rabbit hole. Right. Because I think they're two very different things.
100%.
To be able to understand the psychology, the mindset, the circumstances, the world that can lead to this occurring because it's not happening once or twice. This is happening enough that somebody like Donald Trump could be elected president in the United States. So it does happen and it happens quite a bit. That is not an excuse for the behavior, and it's not removing the responsibility and the obvious choices that are made in going down that path. But in order to combat it, I should say, is to understand it, right? Understand. I don't even feel like people need to have empathy, but an understanding of, okay, well, that's how that happens. And that's part of the process by which we, you
Right.
know, protect our children from also going down that path or, potentially if you can, I don't know how realistic it is because it's almost a cult like high control behavior once they get into it to pull them out of that. Now, it's not that people can't leave cults and go on to live normal lives. They certainly can. It's just a very difficult process. So I don't know that you just pull somebody out of the incel community and turn their belief processes around.
Right. Well, and what we're talking about is we're trying to understand the wound. We're not justifying the ideology.
I think if we find about 10 different ways to harp on the fact that we don't think this is okay, maybe, just maybe, the emotional pegging that I get later will be with the slightly small
Mhm.
with lube. But no, as you were discussing the mindset that kind of gets you there, adolescence, late adolescence, teenage years are anybody who can't remember, they're a difficult time. You're trying to find who you are. Your body is doing weird shit as you're turning into an adult. You're awkward. You have like longer arms than you probably should and a shorter body than you probably should. Your voice is all over the fucking place. And if you are the child of divorced parents, you're out visiting your dad for a month while your mom is signing you up for choir in the midst of your voice changing, right? It's an awkward time, or for, I guess, chorus class instead of, shop.
That that
And
felt oddly autobiographic.
no, not at all. Not at all. And so as you're going through these changes and you're sitting in the middle of chorus with only girls and trying to, hide your erection under
That you
your,
had no control over.
that you have no control. It just happens, under your waistband.
Every man's done that.
Yep.
Not man, every boy's done that.
As you're going through your teenage years, I want to say the erection is as surprising as it would be for like Donald Trump if he were to have one, right? Like holy shit, what happened there? It just happened. Just as surprising, but not as horrifying. So you're awkward. You're trying to make it through that, and then introduce the internet. And as we've said before, man, now all of a sudden you have these social networks that connect people who never would have been connected before. When we were kids, and I do have a mouse in my pocket because you and I were kids at very different times, very different eras. You used to hide under desks from nuclear fallout, and you'd have to go down to the local soda shop, and your doctor would walk into the waiting room with a cig in his mouth and tell you, you got to smoke camels. These are the ways to go. When I was a kid, the
Literally.
internet was just starting to occur. Like it was around. We were starting to get social media, but you didn't really have a great way to connect with masses the way that you do now. And now you have these like very niche things that people can connect on a level. And when you're awkwardly going through these phases and you're connecting with all of the other people who are awkwardly going through it and trying to explain it away in your dumb teenage brain that just doesn't understand the world, you can see how somebody could easily fall down this rabbit hole. Again, there's still a choice there because you do have the ability to, look further on the internet beyond some of these wackadoodle ideas that the world is out to get you. But I could see where it would happen. And I would definitely worry about what my teenage experience had been like if, as I was going through these struggles, I had had the ability to hook up with a whole bunch of other people who similarly were going through the struggles, had no knowledge of it, and then came up with these ideas that, well, it's because, you bring in like this Calvinistic approach to life. Why are shitty things happening to you? Because fuck you. That's why. Beautiful people have wonderful, amazing lives and you suck. And that's why. And we should all get together and rage bait one another on the internet in our mom's basements. But fortunately for me, I didn't grow up in that world. And I grew out of my awkward phase, convinced the first person I saw ever to marry me. And here we are.
Worked. The interesting thing is this intersection of the incels with the manosphere, with the MAGA ideas of masculinity. So, if we start with the incels, pain says, I want to be loved. Entitlement says, I'm owed access. Hatred says, if I cannot be loved, someone must pay. And that's kind of the incel perspective. I mean, under it all, it's just they want to be loved. They want what everyone wants. They want to feel wanted and secure and safe. And then they end up going this route toward hatred. The MAGA world says, your country was taken from you. The manosphere says, your women have been taken from you. And then the incel says that your sexual destiny was stolen before you were even born. And that intersection that comes in there is a dangerous spot. And there's no doubt about it. Now, the wound, though, is, and I think as reasonable adults who have a certain amount of empathy, we can empathize with a wound that is usually inflicted at a point in these people's lives, these men's lives, young men's lives, when they're very vulnerable, that was supported by and encouraged by COVID, that the normal skill set that that usually occurs in teenage years, which is sort of shared suffering. You watch other people embarrass themselves. You hear your friends talk about the things they're worried about. It normalizes it, and you can accomplish some sense of twinship that I am more similar to than dissimilar from others. You see people who are not as attractive as you think they are or should be, that they find relationships and all that,
They
like
start
David.
podcasts.
I mean, you yeah, you like David. I'm telling you guys, no, David's a beautiful man.
Ogre, an ogre,
Yeah,
like Shrek. Imagine Shrek.
he's right. Shrek and the donkey combined is really what
Yeah,
David looks like.
donkey.
Yeah, that'll do, donkey. And then you add in this internet world in which, again, the social media shows people living an incredibly aesthetic life. And the algorithms take these young men down paths and feed them this information day in and day out. And it's comforting to them. It's comforting to find a community. It's comforting to find an explanation in which they're not to blame. Now, the problem with coming to feel like you're not to blame, and I love the Calvinistic approach that the cards were dealt to you before you were born. It's not your fault, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the dangerous part. There's nothing you can do about it because there is. There really is.
And that's the cultish piece to it, right? It's
Yes.
what it is it's great marketing. It's identifying a population that's vulnerable. It's monetizing it through the attention economy. It's not just monetization. I think that's a big piece of it is the ability with social media. It's more eyes on, it's more clicks, it's more time spent looking at stuff. But then from the MAGA world, it's just more supporters. MAGA's never been shy about catering to populations that were otherwise uncatered to. There's this joke from 30 Rock, which aged terribly as a show. I still love it. But he was giving a eulogy for the CEO of GE. And he said, one of the greatest things that this guy came up with was finding a population that he could sell more light bulbs to those who were asleep. And so there was a monster under every bed. There was a danger in every closet. And, then was born the nightlight. And I think what MAGA has been really, really good at was catering to populations that no other political entity has ever wanted to chase
Yeah.
down. The incels, the
Oh,
white nationalists, neo
absolutely.
Nazis, I mean, they cater to these ideas, not necessarily because the people who are in charge like those ideas per se to start with. It was because these were untapped populations. These are
Yes.
populations that were not getting playtime. This was the jazz music of the political world. Nobody wants to fucking hear it. They don't want to hear notes played whenever.
No Yaz flute.
There you go. Now you have a population who nobody was paying attention to, and now they're catering to it. Problem is, 10 years later, those people are starting to become in charge, and now the rest of us have to suffer through Andrew
No
Tate's
doubt.
whatever the
Well,
fuck.
and the way they did that is they became very good at giving private injury a public enemy. And so they took these aggrieved groups that the rest of us felt were truly deplorable, the deplorables, and they found what the private injury was. And then they gave them a ready made public enemy that tied into MAGA. So MAGA says, you're not failing. You're being replaced. MAGA says, you're not lonely, you're being oppressed, you're not underdeveloped, you're a warrior in exile. You don't need therapy, you need dominance. And that's seductive. It's bullshit, but it's therapeutically elegant bullshit.
You need grass fed beef and sauerkraut.
God, I bet those meetings smell terrible.
Nothing will get you a lady like sulfur burps. That's what all women want. They want a manly man smelling like methane. Yeah, I guess I can understand how somebody might go down that rabbit hole, especially when you're brought into the fold at a young, awkward age, tucked penis and all. But what I can't excuse is that these are still choices. And this is the most psychiatric thing I think I've ever said on the show. The worldview that we all hold is one that we create ourselves. And I do this all the time. I do this myself. Sometimes I have to check myself on it, but our belief system is the one that we are making. Nowhere is it written in stone that what we think we have to do has to be done. There's a reason that there are thousands of religions. There's a reason that there are different political viewpoints. It's because we take what's in front of us, we try to make sense of it in the way that it works for our own understanding. And then we say, this is the reality that we have. And the truth is, that's our version of reality. The choices that we make is everything. We have the ability to choose something different. We just go with what appears to create the least amount of discontent in our own lives at that moment in time. But it's not the only thing we can do. We always have choices. And so I don't want to excuse that behavior by saying, well, I get it. No, I do get it. I get why you go down that path, but you're still choosing to go down it. You're still choosing to stay on the path. And when faced with other options, and sometimes you're never faced with other options because you curate your own echo chamber in which to live so that you're not given other options. And I do think that's a problem. And it's the same problem that you and I could have. If we only view this world through one particular lens, then we're only going to see those options. We're only going to see,
Yeah.
and we're not going to take into consideration that, well, maybe the people who are incels are suffering in so many ways. We're not going to think about that. But I
Right.
want to be open to that reality that, well, they are suffering. But I'm not going to excuse it because it is a choice. And they are adults, some of them. And they do
Some
have
of
the
them.
ability, yeah, some of them, but they do have the ability. Well, I mean, if you're old enough to
Well,
vote,
and
and I guess that's it. If you're going to vote based off of this flawed perception of reality, then I want you to be open to the fact that it, it may all be lies.
And I imagine that if we would follow these guys along their life path, many of them outgrow this. But having a couple of boys in that age group, the young end of that age group at least, they're great examples of the Dunning Kruger effect. They're really confident with their worldviews. They're really lacking in some basic knowledge of it. So I can see how a young man might slip down that path. And I do have empathy for them. Now, a world according to Rob moment here, which I'm very
Drink is a
fond of.
drink.
Yeah, is from my stance, and I tend to have a Jungian perspective on most things. There's two major archetypes that sort of define masculinity. It's the warrior and the father. And one of the historic ways in which we helped our young men transition into manhood were rites of passage. And for most of history,
Wait, before you continue on, we have another commercial.
boy,
Yeah. Today's episode of Shrink the Nation is brought to you by Robbie's Alpha Male Academy. At Robbie's Alpha Male Academy, we teach the three pillars of masculinity. One, explain things nobody asked about. Two, never apologize. And three, refer to yourself as high value. Our graduates go on to successful careers in podcast comment sections, LinkedIn motivational posting, cryptocurrency losses, and family court. Robbie's Alpha Male Academy, where every student graduates magna cum loudly.
yeah. And they all get a rite of passage. At any rate, rites of passage. So for most of human history, most cultures had a rite of passage. And, you take a boy who's 15, 16-year-old range, the men of the village would take them out into the woods. They would have some trial that they had to undergo. And it did usually involve fear and physical pain. Of course, it was under the supervision of adult men who were heralding this and protecting the situation, ideally. I suppose there was probably some hazing too. It's a human endeavor. And once they completed that rite of passage, they had proven something to themselves, they had proven something to the men of the village, they had proven something to the village as a whole, and then they were identified as men. So, traditional masculinity has some developmental demands. It requires discipline, sacrifice, apprenticeship, courage, responsibility, protection, self command. And I'm not saying that men have pulled this off flawlessly throughout history. We clearly haven't, but there still were these developmental things that were required. The manosphere is taking these incels, they're offering masculinity without any kind of initiation. So there's no elder, there's no community, there's no service, there's no restraint, there's no competence, there's no earned status. It's just grievance, aesthetic, and enemies. And that's not manhood. That's adolescence. Maybe adolescence with a podcast microphone, but it's adolescence. And these poor kids really aren't receiving that kind of apprenticeship, the shepherding through that challenging transitional phase into adulthood, and they're getting lost. And I do feel for the fact that a vast majority of them who would identify as incel, they're not radicalized. They might post some bullshit on the internet or whatever. But ultimately, they're not going to do harm to anyone. They're just kids who are hurting, who are lonely, and who want to be loved. And I think we all can identify with that without excusing the truly bad, awful behavior.
I disagree that it's
Fuck those
not.
guys.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, fuck those guys. No, fuck them, fuck those guys. And I disagree with you because I'm not taking one for the team on this. We'll post whatever you're saying. No, I disagree in some ways. Like, one, I don't know that I think the traditional rites of passage, taking a boy out into the woods and, circumcising him with a hot knife and then making him hunt a bear. I don't know those are necessary now to let a man be established as a man. I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, which is that these constructs of your reality are if you live in a culture where that was a thing, sure, that was a thing that you did. Did that actually make you a man? No, not at all. It wasn't the thing that allowed you to ascend to manhood or to adulthood. That was a thing that you did because your culture called for it. We don't have that thing, but it's not to say that the vast majority of men don't ascend to adulthood without doing that. That is something that does
Because they've
occur.
changed. I was demonstrating through the
I get that.
extreme. It's changed.
I'm demonstrating to the reality now, which is that the rites of passage aren't anything.
David, you're a psychiatrist. You know damn well it's a thing. It's a psychological thing. That's
It's
as
just
critical as any
correct,
kind
but
of.
it's the ability for somebody to ascend into adulthood, to understand trials and tribulation. This is something that can be accomplished through good relationships with other people.
Absolutely.
This is one of the things that I see as
But
a
but
psychiatrist.
but that's the rite of passage in and of itself. It's having those opportunities. And, in today's world, like in my world growing up, it was when you were allowed to go out into the field and bale hay. It was when you were sent out to feed the cows by yourself for the first time. Those were the rites of passage, but it still was that transitional phase in which mentally, psychologically, you were making a transition from, all right, I was a boy, now I'm doing man's work. And yeah, it was under supervision and you had somebody monitoring you. So that was just demonstration.
Well, but it doesn't have to even be to that extreme. Just by having to pay your own rent.
That's a rite of passage.
It is, but again, it's not, well, you had to go out into the field and bale hay to be able to pay. No,
Well, no,
it's having
getting a
it's
job.
taking right, it's taking on the responsibility of being an adult that can happen to all of us. The problem is when we label it as, well, it has to be this big thing. I think that's where you get the incel community saying, well, I never had that because they're hearing the extreme examples and they're saying, but I never got that. So it must have been withheld from me. And the truth is, no, son, it doesn't have to be the extreme. The rite of passage is when you become an adult and you become responsible. But when you choose not to take the responsibility and you try to give that away to other people by saying, you stole from me. You're stealing my ability to be a man. You're stealing that. And that's what the manosphere is feeding into is this idea that if you didn't go out into the woods and kill a bear with a knife because you didn't have the opportunity to, somebody stole that rite of passage. And the honest to goodness thing is that no, you've had your rites of passage. They just may not be what you thought they would be.
Well, of course they're not, because we don't go out and kill bears anymore.
Right, exactly. You'll see this with patients a lot where they've lacked certain experiences in relationships, like just having an amicable breakup. That's something that not everybody has. I always felt like the best possible thing to have as a therapist with a patient was a rupture, which is where something occurs in the therapy that ultimately it's a break, where it's like somebody has been let down in some way, usually the patient, usually by the therapist. You have some sort of rupture. It wasn't like having a bad experience with your patient was the good thing. It was the ability to repair that. It was having an honest, heartfelt understanding and apology that this person probably never had in their lives that allowed them to experience that and to then open up and gain a level of trust with another human being that allowed them to understand that, yes, I can have this kind of relationship with other people. And that's where the value of therapy I've always seen as being. And so it's the same thing here. These boys are absolutely experiencing rites of passages. They're just being told that they're not. They're being told that that's not what that is. And they're believing it. and they're choosing to believe it. And it's not just boys, it's all humans, right? Like women also have rites of passage. Go back to our previous episode. Please don't. But we never took on a woman's perspective because we're not women, blah, blah, blah. We have all our excuses and we can have our excuses. But the truth is, all people, everybody, all humans have that ascendancy into adulthood. And there
They do.
are rites of passage that occur.
They do. Absolutely.
That's the important thing for us to realize is that we all have it. Whether we want to identify it as being that or not is irrelevant. It's we all have that moment, those points at which we consider ourselves, I'm an adult, and nobody gets to define really what that is but you. The problem with the incel community is that they're being sold on this bill that it never happened for you. And I disagree. I just disagree. Of course, you have something. And this goes back to the Panzer and drone thing. Just because it looks impressive or it was the big deal 100 years ago doesn't mean it's a big deal today. It's a
I
different
concur.
world that they live in. So anyway, I that's all.
We're running long, but I just for the record, every culture didn't have an extreme one. That didn't even mean to apply that. What I'm saying is that through a bunch of mechanisms, social media, internet, changes in society, changes in family structure, that I fear that our generations who have raised these young men have maybe dropped the ball a bit. And yeah, I'm not saying we needed to take our kids out to kill a bear because rites of passage just change with times and with cultures. And all men and women have their rites of
All
passages, and
children. All children. Yeah.
they still do. It's just that because of economic changes, more kids aren't getting driver's license. That's a rite of passage. Kids aren't getting their first job. That's a rite of passage. There's some changes here that have altered that pathway into adulthood, and it is impacting these folks.
And it doesn't have to be economic. Oh, there's some social things to it too. I mean, you look at social media, the reason that a kid might not be willing to get their driver's license now is because they don't have to leave the house to hang out with their friends, right? Like they can do it online.
Exactly.
Why would I need to go and get a job when that would require me leaving the house? We are a social species. We need social interactions to develop. The big issue that I have with social media, because it's like they're interacting. The problem is they're not interacting on a level that we're designed to do that. Is that going to change with time? Are we going to adapt and evolve? Probably. But the generations that are going through it right now are struggling because it's new. They'll figure it out, but the incel thing might just be a side effect of that type of socialization. Before we close out this episode, though, we have another advertisement. Have you been carrying around resentment for years? Want to turn minor inconveniences into core personality traits? Come work out at Robbie's Grievance Gym. Our state of the art equipment includes the Victim Complex Leg Press, the Blame Machine, the Cardio Theater of Self Pity, and our signature class, Advanced Externalization. Learn why every setback you've ever experienced was caused by society, women, the government, your boss, your parents, and Mercury retrograde. Anything except you. Robbie's Grievance Gym. No accountability, max gains. Okay. Do you have a prescription this week?
Don't.
What fucking good are you if you don't have a prescription?
I
Make
know.
something up. Jesus Christ. I have a prescription. So for our listeners, all tens of you, and I have to do this with myself. As you look at the news, especially when it comes to politics, and you have your initial opinion, I encourage anybody to try to get the devil's advocate perspective on it. I don't mean for you to sit there and just try to change your mind necessarily because your initial reaction just might be the way that you feel about a particular topic. But because of the way that news comes out in very biased forms at this point, sometimes it's good to just hear the story from one perspective and then kind of get it from another angle and then just try to realize that it's probably somewhere in between. The way that we feel about everything is something that's kind of constructed in our own minds. And so the reality might be maybe a lot more different depending on the viewpoint that you're coming from. It doesn't make it less valid. It just means that it's just different. It's always helpful for me to have that, to be able to look at a news story and try to look at it from just the different sides. I think it centers me a bit more. I feel a little bit more grounded. And that's why I try to bring up the critics and the supporters for these discussions, even if I do tend to lead on the critic side.
All right. So my prescription is we must remind young men that women are not governmental benefits that were unfairly denied. Sex is not a federal entitlement. A girlfriend is not a VA claim. Attraction is not a constitutional amendment.
Nice. There you go. I like it. So you had one in there.
In the hopper.
That was it. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Appreciate you. Go ahead and hit like, subscribe, leave a pleasant comment if you can on one of the streaming platforms. Try to get our word out. We did update our website. I think there's a couple of tweaks we need to make it better, but it is updated. It's actually pretty cool. Robbie, I don't know if you've been to the website, but the new one's pretty cool. I am going to announce that we did finally figure out the merch thing. So we do have merchandise now. I've placed an order for most of the things to just kind of check on the quality. So I should get those next week for everyone's awareness. Everything is made to order. So once you order it, it's going to take, a week or two, unfortunately, to get there because we're not doing a mass 150 of each thing because I don't think that we'll sell 150 of anything, maybe not even 150 of everything combined. But we just want to make sure you had some merch out there. It's all pretty cool. If anybody has any ideas on stuff they'd like to see, I do want to say that our I'm anti-Nazi, anti-rape, anti-murder, call me old-fashioned shirt is actually doing all right. So I'm looking forward to see how that actually turns out. But go to our website, shrinkthenation.com. If you scroll down, the merch is right there, or if you click on the menu, go to merch, and you'll see our stuff, and you can order from a third-party company, but they make it for us and send it out. So that was it. Anything else, Robbie?
Got nothing.
All right. Then I'm going to cue up that music, and we are out. But before we go, are compliments becoming less effective? Do you need stronger and stronger doses of attention just to feel normal? Ask your doctor about Robbie's Validation Plus. Robbie's Validation Plus is for adults suffering from chronic attention deficiency. Common symptoms include posting opinions online, checking notifications repeatedly, starting podcasts, reading comments about yourself, pretending you don't read comments about yourself. Don't take Robbie's Validation Plus if you're comfortable being ignored. Robbie's Validation Plus, because silence is violence.